Okay, today I have the chance to talk to somebody that was kind of a random find for me. He goes by the artist name of Michael E. He is somebody I ran across in just doing some Spotify surfing. I was in a mood to listen to some nice kind of like bossa house kind of stuff, and I kept on running into his work as being things that jumped out as being really interesting sounding to me. So I went, I did a little background looking, and his bio information was really interesting. And so I randomly did some digging around, and I got hold of him through Facebook, and sure as shit, if he didn't want to get together and have a talk. So I am very excited to speak with Michael E. Hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm fine, Darwin. Thanks for the opportunity. It's nice to speak to you.
Well, it's great to speak to you as well. And so often the people I talk to are people that I have like professional interactions with. It's really interesting for me to talk to somebody for whom my connection is with their artistic work. So I really appreciate you being willing to have this discussion. Why don't we kick this off by having you talk a little bit about what your work is?
Well, I'm a piano-based instrumentalist musician, really. But because modern music technology allows you to do almost anything, my interest in arrangements from listening to music when I was growing up, and then arranging for the cover bands. You know, for instance, I used to play the American Air Force bases in Spain,
Okay.
and they always wanted to hear "Smoke on the Water," "Smoke 'em on the water," shout. So we have to learn to play these pieces of music. So somebody in the band is usually tasked with writing the dots down for what the bass player's supposed to be playing. How long the choruses are, how long the verses are. And I really got interested in arranging through breaking pieces of music down so that we could play them in a cover band. There's two great things for that. It gave me a real interest and taste in arranging, but it also gave me a good ear to learn the chords and to learn what the strings were doing or what the bass was playing. So it was really good grounding into what I'm doing now, which is basically coming up with an idea and then arranging it. And because of modern music technology, there's an infinite sound palette of sounds you can use, and it's so exciting to be able to do that. I mean, this is something that's of this period. I mean, you couldn't do this 20 years ago. You just got traditional instruments. You would have to be an arranger or an orchestra leader or whatever. But now you can do it on your own with your own equipment and produce a track that's fully arranged. And I love that about what I do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And it's funny because that's exactly the reason. When I go back and look why I bought my first like MIDI synthesizer and sequencer combination, it was because I wanted to try doing arrangements where I didn't have to get a group of people together in order to try something out, right?
Yes, exactly. That's another great thing. You get a group of guys together, you form a band, and then it's not always easy being on the road with 4 or 5 people. It's it can get pretty testy at times. So that's another great thing. I don't have to argue with anybody.
Yeah, right.
Do exactly what I want.
In fact, now you can work alone to the extent where you have to kind of get online in order to find someone to argue with, right?
That's right, yeah. And that's quite easy to do at the moment, actually.
Yeah, it seems that way. That's true. Now, one of the things I noticed in your biomaterial is the amazing amount of work that you've done. I mean, you state that you've done more than 20 albums, and you've also been on like, I think you mentioned like 2,000 different kind of collections and stuff that
yeah.
You've really been, you've produced a lot of work, and it's really been kind of widely spread out, which is amazing.
Yeah, well, actually, it's 30 albums.
Oh my goodness.
And it's over 2,000 compilations. Yeah. Obviously, a huge amount of those compilations will never be heard. It's just part of the industry at the moment. People put compilations out. they find a very small audience, except for the bigger ones like say Cafe Del Mar or Buddha Bar,
Right.
or Ministry of Sound. I mean, they go viral. I mean, they sell by the bucket loads. But a lot of compilations really don't do a lot of business, so it's not as impressive as it sounds. But it's still nice that someone thinks enough to want to put a track of mine on a compilation, and I'm always thrilled that they want to do that. So it's good for that. But the thing, I mean, I only started as a solo artist in 2006, so I've almost done a lifetime's work in about 12, 13 years. But to be honest, I mean, the music's just poured out. It's just, I've never been stuck. It just keeps coming, and long may it continue.
That's really interesting because over the years of my podcast, I've had a couple of people, most particularly I think of like Mike Monday, who are sort of these inspirational speakers who try and stimulate people into being able to get their music done. And I think an awful lot of artists would understand that thing of like having trouble getting stuff done. You seem to have no problems doing that. You seem to be able to get work done really, really easily.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it becomes a discipline almost. I mean, the great creative part is kind of the initial idea where you get really excited and you think, oh yeah, this could work, this piece, this little idea could work, and then that's like the 5% inspiration,
right?
And then getting it finished is 95% the sweat. You know, it's just the work. You've got to get the work done. And what I've got into the habit of doing is if something's not working, if it's not just happening, it's not inspiring, I just delete it. I'll get rid of it. I won't waste any more time on it. And I've learned to trust the process now, that if I do that and I just keep trying things, eventually something comes up and I'm off. So having done 30 albums and maybe, I don't know, maybe 450 tunes, it's become a process that I'm comfortable in and just works for me. So that's how it was for me. I mean, I understand how you could get stuck and think, oh, I'll never finish this, or I'll never finish anything. And I recognise that can happen. But it's just, fortunately for me, it never has.
That's fantastic. I'm going to want to ask more questions about this because I got a lot of questions. But before we get into that, one of the things that I really like talking to people about in my podcast is their background, how they got to be the musicians that they are. Now, you talked a little bit about working with a cover band and kind of getting your arrangement chops there, but I'm curious about sort of like before that. How did you, growing up, how did you get into music? But also what's interesting to me is, again, if I go back to your bio material, you talked about how working with the computer was really what opened the door and allowed you to kind of like really fulfill your mission that you set for yourself.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But a lot of people still find the computer kind of an intimidating partner. And so I'm curious, like, how you came up as a musician, and one that was obviously a strong enough musician to be touring and stuff, but at the same time were able to embrace the computer technology that helped you to see your future.
Well, that came together because when I realized what musical tech could do for you, it so excited me, because I thought, this is what I've been looking for. I didn't know I was looking for it, but when I saw the possibilities and the potential of it, I was so excited. And obviously, being slightly older and not growing up with computers, it was intimidating, because you just switch Logic 9 on and you just look at it and you think, oh my God, I'll never get my head around this. I'll never understand this. So there was a music college in Sheffield, and I kind of got to find out that they were teaching this kind of courses in software and how to use digital recording. But they didn't have any courses tailored for specifically what I wanted to do. It was more mainly for DJs who wanted to mix.
Oh, okay.
But I got talking to the guy, Sasha, who owned the studio, and he said, well, oh, I could tailor a course for you, it'd be personal. I'll help you to get your head round Logic if you will come in and give a few lectures to some of the students. So we made a deal that I'd do a few lectures, teach a bit of piano, and he'd teach me how to use Logic. And he did. And once I saw even in more depth what Logic could do, I was just amazed. The annoyance in the automation, the actual fact that you could put 60 tracks down and fill every one up, whereas before I've been recording on like a digital recorder where you had to bounce tracks down because I'd only got 16 tracks.
Right.
So I kept having to bounce. But when I saw that Logic, where you could just keep adding tracks and you didn't have to bounce it, you could automate every single track, you could apply effects to every single track. The sound palette was vast. It just blew my mind, and it just enabled me to do what I wanted to do.
And your background as a piano player, did you start as a young child, or is that something that you picked up later as well?
I started as a child. My father was into music. He liked. He was trying to play a trumpet. He wasn't too good, but he wanted me to be interested in music because I think he wanted me to play the piano so he could play the trumpet with me.
Okay, all right.
So he wanted me to go to piano lessons, but I went. I think it was about 8 or 9, but I hated it. I just hated it. I loved the sound of the piano, and I loved the sound of music. But I just didn't like what I was learning. It was really dry classical stuff. It was scales, arpeggios. I just wanted to be outside playing football with my friends.
Uh-huh.
I daren't tell him that I didn't want to do it anymore. So I kept going, and I think I survived about 6 years of torture, and I must have learned something in that 6 years, even though I hardly ever practiced. But I did like music. I mean, I really did like music. I remember being so frustrated with the piano teacher. Are you familiar with a track by Ramsey Lewis called Wade in the Water?
No, I'm not.
Well, I heard that, and it's like bluesy piano, and it's got a great rhythm to it. And I heard that, and I thought, if I want to play piano, this is what I want to play like. I don't want to play like Rachmaninoff or all this stuff. I want to play like, I want it to be blues.
Sure.
I took the record to the piano teacher and I said, could you teach me to play something like this? And he just sniffed at it and he said, no. No. So that was that. And then I got to about 15 years of age and I kind of eventually plucked up the courage to tell me that I didn't want to go to piano lessons anymore. He was really annoyed about it, but I just didn't want to do it anymore. And within the year, Motown, I started to hear Motown. This is about 1969 and 1970. And I just had to be involved in music. I just loved it. And then Santana, early Santana at the Woodstock. And so I was interested in actually becoming a percussionist. I bought a lot of percussion instruments and some congas, and I started to play those. I found it kind of easier than playing the piano. You just got to have a sense of rhythm, really. I mean, there are techniques involved, obviously, but it just meant that you could join in easy. But I kind of really wanted to get back to music that was harmonic, because percussion's great, but you can't play it on your own. Well, you can play it on your own, obviously you can, but it's not as satisfying as sitting at a piano and playing a tune that you like or some nice chords that turn you on. Right. So I eventually kind of realised that if I wanted to be a musician, I would have to play the piano. And then when I could choose what I wanted to play, I started to actually love to play the piano. So fortunately for me, the early piano lessons didn't destroy any kind of passion for music, but it could easily have done.
Right. Well, that's such an interesting story because, like for myself, I had a piano teacher that all she wanted to do was teach out of the Shams and Thompson's books, right?
Yeah.
Which was just all sort of like dumbed down versions of classical stuff. And I desperately wanted to do anything else, and she wouldn't have it, right? And so I ended up also kind of saying, I'm just not doing this anymore and frustrating my parents. But it was sort of like taking up a second instrument, in my case, guitar, in your case, percussion, sort of like freed the ability or separated the ability of making music from taking those lessons. And it put me in a position of finding a way to enjoy it and eventually coming back to the keyboards as, if nothing else, a great tool for arrangement.
Yeah, of course, of course. I think also, I don't know what age you were when this happened, but I'm guessing you would be probably early teens.
About 15, same
Yeah, yeah.
kind of as
Well,
you.
the same for me. I think that's when you develop your own tastes and love for music. When stuff turns you on, you can buy it. You can be up to there. You're listening to your parents' music. You might be listening to the radio.
Right.
You know, you're forming a taste, but I think the early teens, I think that's when you start to get really passionate about music that you want to hear, that you love, that you want to be part of. So
That's
I
your
think,
personal thing, right? Yeah.
yeah, I think that's probably the same journey that you had.
Right. It sounds like it. Now, one of the things that interests me when I listen to your music, a lot of it, again, I came to it sort of from this bossa-infused or Brazilian-infused house-type tracks.
Yeah.
All of them have, these very kind of chill but still relatively complex percussion tracks. Is that something that you sort of developed as you were playing percussion, something that caught your ear and drew you in, or what drew you to that style of music?
As I've just kind of touched upon, I really developed a kind of an interest and a love for percussion, and especially Brazilian percussion, Cuban, Latin, salsa percussion, timbales, congas,
Right.
bongos, guiros, triangles, all that, but especially like the bossa nova, because I used to love Antonio Carlos Jobim,
Hmm.
and he had an arranger, Klaus Ogerman, who did the strings. I'm not sure who arranged the percussion, but I always loved how it kind of, it wasn't drums, it wasn't like a big fat beat on the drums. It was subtle, it was floaty, it was almost poetic. Whereas English rock music, it was like 4/4. It was kind of hammered. It was just just a really solid beat, which is okay. It's fine. I mean, it turns a lot of people on. But there was something about Brazilian percussion that was just a world away from that. So when I produce a piece of music, I'm always trying to find an interesting angle for the percussion parts. And because of modern music tech, you can get the same floaty feels, but it's just different flavors and different sounds. But it all comes from that Brazilian vibe, I think.
Sure. What do you use to actually produce your percussion tracks? Do you hand play stuff? Do you have machines? Do you use loop libraries? Do you sample off of old vinyl? I mean, it's hard for me to even tell because it's so much locked into kind of this cool groove that I stop listening for the details and just kind of float away with it, which is, I mean, maybe why it is that I enjoy it so much.
Thanks for saying that. I'm glad you said that because that's the intention. I don't really want anything to jar. Everything to me, it has to be like a smooth ballet. It has to work properly. If it jars and it's not rhythmic, then it just doesn't work. So yeah, I kind of really I'm after that effect where it's there but it's not there almost.
Uh-huh. Are you hand playing this stuff, or are
Oh,
you?
yeah, all right. Well, some of it, but mostly it's chopped up loops
Okay.
or like it's. The reason I don't play a lot of it is because I haven't got a very sophisticated mic system at home. I haven't got a proper studio, so miking up is a technique that I'm not too familiar with. So I'm quite limited to what I can play live through a mic.
It's interesting you say that because this is really, again, a lot of what I wanted to ask was about some of your technique because I'm sort of confounded by it. I mean, you have these great percussion sounds, but it's not really machiney. It's sort of very It's very human sounding, but also a lot of times the instruments that you choose for leads, sometimes you have horn sounds, sometimes you do sort of a very classic flute thing, which tends again to really be a nod to bossa stuff. But also a lot of times you'll use either vocal snippets or you'll use sort of these found sounds like people speaking on the telephone or whatever. And all of it locks in so nicely, but it also means that it's clear to me you don't just focus on like one technique for producing stuff, or at least it doesn't feel like it, you know?
Well, I think that's because obviously I've got me go-to solutions, like I would imagine every musician in the world, whoever produced music has. But I think because, as I've already alluded to, the massive sound palette, the massive opportunity to use sounds. Now, I mean, before, obviously, computers and software, you were limited to traditional instruments, saxes, strings, piano, drums, and God knows, I mean, there's been enough wonderful music produced on that. But when modern music tech came in, I mean, the sound palette just exploded. I mean, it's infinite now, and I like to use it without going too crazy. I like to put flavors into the music that sound a little bit odd, a little bit quirky, a little bit, it's not. I heard a lot of this in the Café Del Mar selections.
Right.
Are you familiar with Café Del Mar?
I am, yes.
Yeah, right. Well, I really liked the Café Del Mar, and that was the first kind of music I heard that was kind of different to traditional music. Although some of it was quite organic, they were starting to use a lot of found sounds and voices, and that really appealed to me. I really loved that aspect of music where you weren't limited to traditional instruments, that you could be a little bit more inventive. So really, I'm thankful that I'm producing music in this age, because that's what allows me to do what I do.
Right. Now, one of the things that you note is that you've actually been able to put yourself in a position to be a full-time musician producer. How long has that been the case?
A eureka moment in 2006 where I realized that you've only got one life, and this is not a play. I'm living my life now, and I was in an art gallery. I was really, really bored in the job, and I just thought, I'm wasting my life. I've got something I'm passionate about, and I'm not doing it. And so in 2006, in March in 2006, I handed my notice in and said, right, that's what I'm going to do. And a lot of people said, you must be crazy. People don't make any money out of making music. And I thought, well, maybe they don't, but I'll never know if I don't try.
Right.
So I handed my notice in, and immediately you have to start earning some money. So I'd do like pot washing jobs or a bit of gardening while I was producing music. But the thing was, I wasn't working full time, because when I work full time in a job, I know how it goes, and it goes for a lot of people like this. You get home, you have a shower, you have something to eat. By this time, it's 8 o'clock at night, and you just got no energy left to produce any music. You just
right.
don't feel like it. You don't feel like it. And I knew that if I got a full-time job, music had never happened. But I also realised I had to earn a living. So I just struggled for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and then the money started to come in. I wasn't able to sustain a living out of it. I still had to do odd jobs, but eventually it just came right for me. And about 5, 6 years ago, I came to a position where I didn't have to do any more odd jobs, and I could just earn from music. And every week I thank the lucky stars that continues to be the case, because I'd hate it if it all dropped off and I couldn't do it anymore.
Sure. I imagine. But congratulations on for finding a way to do it. That's fantastic. How much do you treat it now? I mean, you mentioned a little earlier that there's sort of like a discipline that you place on this in order to be effective. To what extent do you have to kind of treat it, at least internally in your head? How much do you have to kind of treat it like it's a job?
Well, it's not a job. because it's a passion.
Right.
You know, it's never ever felt like a job. It's never ever felt like a chore. And there's not many days go by where I don't do some kind of music. Like even if it's just playing the piano, I will do something. I couldn't have produced 30 albums if I wasn't disciplined about it. If I'm away from the piano or the computer, then I'm always aware of music and I'm always aware of sounds. Like I'd like to cycle, and I go up into the mountains in Mallorca, and it's amazing up there. I mean, you can hear nature, and to me that's almost like a symphony of its own. You know, you can hear the wind in the leaves, you can hear the little insect buzzes and chirps, and you can hear the birds singing, and in the summer the crickets, and it's just so I'm always aware of sound, and sound is something that has always fascinated me, and I love sound. So yeah, I'm always aware of it, even if I'm not at the piano.
Do you do much in terms of like, because a number of your songs have like nature-based recordings in them. Do you do ever any like field recording or take recorders out with you when you're experiencing this stuff?
No, I would love to, but I haven't got round to buying myself a portable digital recorder. But it's something I keep thinking that I really need to do because, you know, you hear snatches of conversations. You hear some people's voices are so melodic, and you've got so mellifluous, and you just want to record that. You know, obviously in radio and on television, the voices are important. You know, if you've got a screechy voice, it doesn't go down well. Some people have got amazing voices, you know, and I just think, ooh, I'd love to record that, or I'd love them to come and read me something that I could put into a track. But yeah, voices are very important, but also, you know, singing voices as well. But just speaking voices, I mean, it can add so much to a track, just a simple phrase.
Yeah, well, and there again, you have very few tracks that kind of follow the pop orientation of having, you know, a vocalist singing choruses and verses and that kind of thing. Most of your stuff focuses around, you know, a groove and then a melodic element. And often, if you're using voices at all, it'll either be snippets and loops, or it'll be things like, again, voices on telephones or voices or spoken voice things, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is that just the way that you hear music, or are you actively trying to steer clear of the songwriter, vocalist kind of musical phrasing, or is...
No, not at all. What comes out, really. I mean, right. I can't write to order. You know, somebody will say, why don't you do a really thumping housey track? And I think, well, because that's not what comes out. Uh-huh. What comes out. And generally what comes out, I listen to it and follow it. And the music almost dictates to me what comes next rather than the other way around. So, no, I don't consciously try and not write pop songs or songs with normal structures. It's just what comes out. I try to make the music take people on a journey, because I want to go on a journey. I want the music to develop as it unfolds. So that's kind of where I come from.
I see. So then when you're actually making a track, what does it look like? Do you start with, on the piano, developing a chord structure? Do you start with a percussion, making percussion tracks? What generally draws the music out of you?
Well, I would say the vast majority of the music that I've produced was because I've been sitting at the piano and I've been noodling and I thought, oh, that sounds nice. That little phrase there, that sounds good. Or you probably notice, I mean, I don't use a lot of chords in a piece of music. I mean, the chord structures aren't very sophisticated. Sometimes I just use one chord in a piece of music. But it's what you do with that one chord. I mean, if you make that chord interesting, like with inversions, and then what you put to the chord can make it interesting. So, so mostly it's sitting at the piano. But obviously, if you've got access to loops, you might audition a few loops, and you think, oh, I love that groove. I'm feeling that, and then I could start from I could start from a drum loop or a percussion loop, but that doesn't tend to happen as much as from the piano. Oh, and also I can play a little bit of guitar, bossa nova style, like.
Right.
So sometimes I'll fiddle around on the guitar and I'll think, oh, those chords sound all right. So it might come from the guitar as well.
Sure. Now, one of the problems, I know this is the case for me, is the difference between noodling and turning the recorder on seems to be a huge gulf, right? There's something like, okay, I'm having fun, this sounds great. Oh crap, I have to turn the DAW on, I have to figure out how to, what have you done to make it?
Can I give you a tip?
Yeah, please.
Can I give you a tip?
Please.
Before you start playing, switch the recorder on.
Just do it, right?
Simple. Just switch it on, get a project opened so that if something strikes you, you're ready to go.
Yeah, you know what's funny is that I still suffer from being an old recording studio guy where having the tape running cost a lot of money. I mean, it costs nothing now to just like pour crap on a hard drive. I could leave a hard drive running all day long and probably not ever have a problem with it. But somehow in my mind, that seems like, well, you can't do that. That's wasting space.
Well, Darwin, you've got to get over that, man.
I guess I do, right?
It's the same thing with digital photography. You could take thousands of pictures now. You don't have to worry about paying for them to be developed or develop it yourself. And it just frees up creativity to be able to do that where cost isn't an issue.
Right. I guess that always was the goal. We just didn't realize it would actually happen in our lifetimes, I think.
Yeah, I know. I'm so glad it has.
So I'm wondering then too. I mean, there is a lot of different instrumentation on your work. Do you ever collaborate with others?
I like to work with a trumpet player called Tim Jallo, who's a German guy from Berlin. I love the sound of his trumpet, and I've done maybe 7 or 8 tracks with him. I also sometimes work with a singer from Chicago called Sarai Usri, who's got a really, really smoky, sensuous voice. I love the sound of her voice. I work with her sometimes. I've done a couple of collabs or remixes with other people, but really I prefer to work with myself because, you know, I'm not waiting for anybody. Right. The music can happen spontaneously, and so usually it's mostly on my own. But another great thing, though, about modern music tech is you can work with people remotely. I mean, I've never met Tim and I've never met Sarai, and yet we can produce music together.
Right. Where are you located again?
I'm in Spain, in Mallorca, and Sarai's in Chicago, and Tim's in Germany. And I've never met him, but we can produce music together. It's amazing. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Do you do anything special, like use any of these online sites, or do you just send over an audio file and have them send something back?
Just a WAV file or an MP3 file to start with, so that they can hear what they need to do, what they need to put on top, and then they send me the file back, and then I doctor it and Logic. You know, I might chop it, I might move phrases around a bit, because I usually ask Tim to play over the whole lot, you know, from start to finish,
right?
And then I'll find nice little phrases and I'll work it in. That's what I usually do with Tim. With Sarai, she's more song based, so she'd really want to sing me a song, but I don't really want to hear a song a lot of the time. So I'll chop Sarai a little bit, but they're both happy, but neither of them complain, which is nice. It's nice to work with people that don't complain.
Yeah. Well, in that case, though, too, is it ever the case where, like, they might do one song for you, but that ends up kind of content that you can use for 10 songs?
That could happen with Tim quite easily, actually, because, you know, he sent me, I've probably got an hour's worth of Tim's playing trumpet, and it would be so easy to just raid that store and just chop things up and make new phrases out of it. Right. And that's always a possibility. But you see, I've already got a load of samples in Apple loops, trumpet samples, that I used before I ever met Tim. And I think Tim approached me because he'd heard my music with trumpet in, and he thought, well, you know, I play trumpet, can I play on your tracks? And I thought, well, yeah, that'd be great, because sometimes you can't always. Are you familiar with Melodyne?
Yes.
Right. Well, you can find a phrase and you can drop it into Melodyne, and you
Sure,
can
really
change,
tweak it, right?
Yeah, you can make it play a completely different melody. But see, I do that, so I don't always have to necessarily raid Tim's stuff, and I don't think that would be fair to him. I don't do that so much.
So how did you get to know these people? It sounds like Tim actually reached out to you.
Yeah, yes, he did. And Sarai did in a way. She'd done a remix she'd done a song for a guy in England called Soul Eyes, and she'd been listening to my music, and she said, "Would you like to remix this track?" So I said, "Yeah," because remixing is a great thing to do. I mean, it's another avenue of creativity. It makes a change from creating your own music. You can mess around and move things around. And so I enjoy that process too. And she liked what I'd done, and she said, "Can we do some music together?" But as I say, I don't write specifically for anybody. And I said, "Well, if I come with anything that I think you could sing over, I'll send it here." And about 2 or 3 months later, I sent her something. So I think we've done about 10 tracks together.
Interesting.
She sent, actually, I did it the other way around a month or so ago. She sent me a vocal that she was sitting at traffic lights in Chicago, and she had an idea, and she just got a phone out. She just recorded a vocal, and she said, "Maybe you might be able to do something with this." Sent me the vocal, and I kind of put the back into it, and it turned out really well. We only had to alter one phrase. I had to say, "Can you sing this part again?" Because what you sang in your car just doesn't. I can't make it fit any of the chords I'm using. So we just made her sing one phrase. But what amazes me is that she wasn't singing to anything, and yet she's in pitch.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Well,
it was. Because I expected to be running the vocal through Melodyne
right.
and correcting it, and I didn't have to. I thought, well done, Sarai. Good girl.
That's pretty magical. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I asked that because I think an awful lot of people would like to do more collaborative stuff, but it's hard to find people to collaborate with. And it sounds like part of the trick for you was getting your music out there and then being open to having people approach you about it as well.
Yeah, and then another problem crops up, and that's the accounting financial problem.
Oh, yeah, right.
I mean, I'm not with a label, so if you're with a label, the label takes care of all that.
Right.
But I hate accounting. I hate going through reams and reams of streaming sheets, and
right.
That's been played here, that's been played there. What is their cut? What's my cut? How do I work all this out? So I kind of really don't want to do collaborations because I really don't want to do the accounting.
Oh, sure.
So what I've started to do is just pay them up front for their contributions, so I don't have to do that down the line. And if that track gets placed on a compilation where I get an advance, then I'll split it 50-50.
Got it.
But if I was with a label and they were taking care of that, I'd probably do many more collaborations.
I see. So what are the next things that are up for you? What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm working on the next album, and I just finished the 7th track. So I've probably got about 5 or 6 more tracks to do, and then I'll release another album. And it's pretty much just, you could say, if you were unkind, you could say, well, you're just churning it out. And I'd say, well, yeah, because I like churning it out, so that's what I'm going to do.
Well, I don't think that's unkind if that's what you like doing. And the fact of the matter is, again, I would say that your stuff is uniformly of great quality and beautiful to listen to. It really kind of hits a certain kind of spot for the listener, which I think is key because there's not a confusion. If people want to hear the music you do, it's the music you do, right?
There's become a pressure that I didn't expect, and that is to keep the standard up. So now I will delete more ideas than I used to do, because I'm aware now that I've set standards, and I really don't want them to drop.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, how many times have you really liked a musician in the past, and you've loved an album, and then the second one comes out, and you think, "Oh man, what a disappointment!"
Oh, right. Yeah, no kidding.
What a disappointment. And it's not always down to the artist. That's down to a multitude of factors, but it usually happens to people that are signed up with someone, and somebody else is calling the shots.
Right.
Well, I'm not signed up to anyone. I can do whatever I like. So I've got to be in charge of the editing, and it's me, and I'm responsible for keeping the standard up, and I quite like that, but I'm aware of that now, so it doesn't make it any harder, but I've just got to keep standards up.
Sure. Well, I think, though, that what you just did, though, is kind of mapped out in a nutshell the sort of career an awful lot of people would like to do. One where you make decisions, artistic decisions, and you follow through on them. What would you say to somebody who came to you and said, I want to do like you did? How do I get started?
Unless the label can promote you and market you, I would say don't sign with a label. Sign with an aggregator. There are several around. There's like CD Baby is a famous one in America.
Okay.
And an aggregator is a person that you give the files to, and they put the files on all the download platforms around the world. They take, say, 15% cut of your sales. They do all the accounting, and then you get the rest of the royalties. Whereas a label will probably take 50%. They'd get the music on the download platforms, but they will probably go for an aggregator themselves. So they've become like a middleman in a way. Mm-hmm. The aggregator I work with is Artists Without Labels. It's AWAL, AWAL. I would say to anybody who wants to do what I do, get in touch with AWAL or CD Baby and start releasing your own music, start putting your own bulletins out, start building your own fan base, get people on board with you. If they like your music, they're happy to do it. And you finish up with like an army of people that like what you do, that are spreading the word. And it's a slow process. It takes a long time, but it's so worthwhile.
Well, that sounds like an amazing thing. Well, Michael, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. This was an inspirational discussion. It was really great to hear not only what you do, but how you do it and how you think about doing it. It's a great opportunity for us to see inside your mind.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and I do tend to ramble on a bit, so I expect you to be doing a bit of editing.
No, not much, actually. It was right on the button. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks.
So with that, we will say goodbye. Have a good one.
Yeah. Thanks, Darwin. Take care.
Thanks to Michael E. for the chat. It was, as you could tell, a little different from our normal fare, but it was interesting to hear about somebody who produces a lot of music. And so if you get a chance, check it out. It's some nice laid-back bossa-inspired housey stuff. It's kind of interesting listening. For those of you who are interested in Macs and Macs-related stuff, I hope that you've been checking out what's been going on with the Macs Expo. If not, check it out at cycling74.com/expo. We're starting to put out information about what some of the workshops are. There's some killer workshops going to be there, but also there are going to be chances for performance, chances to spend time with engineers, a lot of opportunities to get to hang out with me and my friends at Cycling and with a lot of other Macs users. So if you're into it, check it out, cycling74.com/expo. If you go down towards the bottom, you'll see a link for adding yourself to the announcements list. That's going to be the easiest way to keep track of any new announcements that come up. Again, a lot of the workshop stuff is going to get revealed over the next few weeks. I think you'll find a lot of it pretty interesting. So in any case, thanks for listening. I will catch you next time around. Bye.